So I finally have to weigh in on the Trayvon Martin case. Now, without going through all the details of the case as it has evolved until this Easter, I would very much like to talk about why this case is so symbolic for a lot of people. Um, and I've been reading, listening, of course, to news media, both from one extreme, I would say Fox on one end, to the other, MSNBC, with Melissa Harris Perry and civil rights leader Al Sharpton as two of its anchors on its programs that people can just click on their remote control and see. So those are two sort of camps of news that I've been listening to, watching, reading, and a lot of things in between. And I'd like to say that I have noticed that the opinions are as polarized as the news media. And that's unfortunate because the human stories are often forgotten. Now, it's difficult for me to say all this without admitting that I have a liberal bias. And I would say my liberal bias is a demographic one. It isn't anything specific to me. I'm a young black man from America, and so it resonates very strongly with me when I think about the Trayvon Martin case because just off the bat, he's not an anonymous person to me. He's not someone who is unlike me, and that's immediately what one hears when we listen to a Fox News and the more conservative pundits about, they always set up this them and us, and at least on the more liberal sides, you have some of the bantering, but at the same time, you have some of the tossing back and forth. They'll quote each other, they'll point each other out, but at the same time, you do have dialogue. And the less vitriolic the tone of the talk, the less yelling, the less name calling, the less I think this and I think this that you have, the more opportunity there is for deep listening. And with something as significant to our culture, to our times as this, we have to really engage in serious dialogue and not just look for how we can gain one-upsmanship on who will win this debate, what will be the so-called final stamp and outcome, but how this contributes to an ongoing narrative of who we are as American people. Now, who these individuals in this case are as, a white identified person being able to kill a black identified person, young male, the source of, I would say, both our popular culture written on this black male body and our prison industrial complex, our military industrial complex. I'm sitting here in Hanoi, in the northern part of Vietnam, and this place, the this place now, yes, in the way that it's moved on, but also this place as in what it means metaphorically for us in this specific instance of the Trayvon Martin case, because we know all of the so-called urban youth that were swept off the streets of America to come and perpetrate a war. We weren't even declared war, but this conflict here, to perpetrate war here and annihilate so many, other mother sons here in this part of the world, and to do that over and over and over again, there is a deeper conversation about who we are as a people that needs to happen because what makes our society so vulnerable to the pitfalls of war, of just falling into war, where we're often the aggressor over and over again. What does that have to do with our ability to, in a sense, do the same thing to those so-called urban, voiceless young men in particular, but also women who were drafted in the Vietnam War, who didn't come home as heroes in a war that didn't even get popular support at home, just like what's going on in Iraq now, just like what, in Afghanistan. So when we look at these things, and with Pakistan and our relationship with Pakistan and fueling India and North Korea and South Korea and fueling this disunity. So these sorts of phrases about the way that we leave fractures in other nations with these bodies is the same fracture that we see at home. And so to see that a Trayvon Martin is annihilated on the streets should shock us, just as those 5 black men who were shot, just a few days ago, right around Easter. Was it in Tulsa, Oklahoma? And my aunt was telling me about the news report. And she said it came on the news like this. It wasn't News at 10 or anything. It wasn't like, a main event was happening. These were just 5 black men who were shot. 3 of them were dead at last count, and 2 were severely injured in the hospital, in critical condition. And it was just 2 white guys who, one of them, their father had been killed, I believe, shot by a black man. And so it was just this kind of vitriolic racial hatred. And it seems to me this Easter, the only thing that has really been resurrected is Jim and Jane Crow. They came back as a couple and in force. And so I asked myself, as a black man walking around, whoever people might perceive me to be, and people have said some very nasty things on the videos here. I could be talking about the moon and the stars, and people try and have conversations about me, my race, my sexuality, my perceived class, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or you as, the foreigner in whatever situation. And in all those instances, I just see this constant sort of projection of fear onto the other. And that quickly decays into conflict, violent conflict, where we're not even able to use words to resolve conflict. And I look at this Trayvon Martin case and I think to myself, not just the President, Obama is talking about this. If I had a son, my son would have looked like Trayvon. What he was saying, I walk around the corner of 34th and Vermont in Louisville, Kentucky, and I look like Trayvon. Dare I wear a hoodie? I look like Trayvon. Dare I wear, saggy pants and, big beefy Nikes? I look like Trayvon just because of what I'm wearing. Now, there are so many ways that this just becomes pitiful, in a sense, silly. When I'm sitting here thinking about my body, not some anonymous, that person, what was he doing, try and pick apart the situation between Zimmerman and Trayvon that night, who attacked whom, but the idea that my body itself is such a threat that it warrants policing, that there's anybody in the borders of my nation, in the realms of my culture, that are policed, like women's bodies are policed, coveted under what people call marriage. It's an institution, a partnership that has been so bent historically as to police the female body. And so to see this continual policing, formally and informally, through mental colonization, through KK colonization, of this idea that we set up a racial fears so polarized, so deep, that politicians can call upon the black male body and galvanize conservative votes, that people will make investments about the failure of people in poverty in America, and sell those derivatives upon those derivatives upon those derivatives, and lo and behold, make tons of money gutting a system by betting on our failure. I say, where is the social solidarity? Because there can't be, because it's not even in dialogue. We don't even understand our differences. And the fact those differences are so threatening that we come to blows over this. That my body is potentially so threatening that the so-called wrong place at the wrong time, but more and more we're asking ourselves, where is the wrong place? Where is the wrong time? If it's not just a gated community, it's also how we respond as strangers on any random streets. Because as everyone said, this could be my son. This could be my son. Suspect as he's going to school. Suspect in school. Suspect in a store. Suspect just in any public space where we are. Where does that policing end? Where are the limits of that policing where police can bust into your house If they suspect that a crime is being, if they like, there was a thing about, say, if they smell weed, they can bust into your house. If they hear, I mean, smelling weed is one thing coming out, of somebody's private domain, but then who knows where those limits are? Or police can just police you, threaten you, coerce you, let you know that your first representative, your first arm, your first reach into the government is through policing, not through voting, because then so many become disenfranchised from the vote. So many will never be able to vote. So many are threatened away. So many are disenchanted who don't even aren't even yet stuck in the prison industrial complex or the military industrial complex, and they're just so disenfranchised by a system that has never made sincere attempts to engage them, me, people who look like me, in dialogue. It's always through the notion of this policing or this entertainment. And both, as you can see, how this man mutilated himself, are as psychological, can be as psychologically threatening. Whereas you become the monster, you become the monster. You become that thug. Now, the other part of this that I'd like to link this to is this issue of veiling, this issue of keeping on your hood, your branded, your urban culture gear that makes you in a sense anonymous. And just to give you a stark example, think about Canal Street in New Orleans. On many weekends, you'll have the riders. You'll have, the it's young black urban culture. They'll be in there in their white t-shirts sagging with their huge white t-shirts like draped around them. Stark white, brothers be crisp, hair be fly. Sisters, roaming up and down the street. Youth social entertainment, but I think that youth culture warrants a particular kind of gaze because we are a consumerist culture that so feeds on youth culture to even gain our own sense of identity. I mean, look at all of our pop culture. It's so youth focused. It's almost like we're vampires on youth culture. And I mean, again, you to use Michael Jackson as an example. I mean, he always talked about the ways that but see, this is the difference between being a vampire. That he gives props to youth culture for inspiring his dance, for the themes that he talked about, the children, the youth. Um, Not in the sexual way, obviously, I'm not talking about. But then you look at cosmetics or in fashion as two arms of our popular culture, and they feed off youth as in we'll sell you youth in a bottle. You buy this and you'll be young forever. You dress like this, you'll be young forever. You use this hair color, this you adopt the mode of this star, you'll be young forever. So youth cultures in general are something that we need to look at more critically, and popular culture in particular as a major outlet of youth culture, of youth cultural expression, but to also understand the ways that it's pruned by adults and what that pruning does to make it socially um, acceptable, palatable, delicious, yummy, that people want to buy it. And the fact that that is so reduced to sex and youth sexuality, that we sexualize young people's bodies so much. And this, again, this person is this perfect example. At 5 years old, he's singing about, I wonder who's loving you. Biggest, heartbreak songs and on and on and on. Like, why is this young person, why do we desire the young body to be so sexual? And so we start to look at even the sexualization of this hoodie, because the other side of it is that this big black thug will screw you. It's that ethnosexual myth about the black body that they really are just on the plantation. They're these bucks that are waiting to screw, and they are going to screw these, this harem of black women who are just waiting to be screwed and birth as many babies. It's plantation politics all over again. And so when I see a culture that's fed on, and men who even veil themselves to identify with, to have some anonymity within a culture that has such a gaze on their bodies, it's hard out there for him. As they say, it's hard out there being black in America, and that's what this Trayvon case says to me.